quick message before today's webinar. If you are involved with or know any events that require ticketing or admissions, we have a purpose-built platform just for ticket events. Like RunSignup, it's free to use and provides the same marketing and event day tools to help you put on a seamless event. For more information, visit TicketSignup.io. You can schedule a call there or just start creating your event for free today. Now on to the webinar.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another Timer Tip Tuesday for Race Day scoring. So today we're going to be covering data checks. If you joined us last week, we covered an overview of cross-country scoring, and we did say that there are some important details you should know about with data checks when it comes to cross-country scoring. So today we will cover some examples that can be used with cross-country, but we're also going to give you a general overview of how to use data checks and data actions. So thanks again for coming. We're going to be covering data checks and data actions today, just general overview as well as some specific use cases and examples. So here's the agenda. We're going to do a refresher for data checks and data actions, talk through the defaults we've built for you, how you can export and import them and manage them, how you can use the data checks themselves. So you can use the search filters and raw read filters, go through some examples, show you a newer feature called Edit History that's really nice when it comes to data checks and data actions, and specifically some data actions for cross-country. Okay, so before we get too far with this, let's define these.
Hey, Avery, we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So before we get too far, we need to define these. So basically, there are two pieces of the system. There's data actions and data checks. The big difference between data actions and data checks is that data actions happen automatically without anything for you to do. They just happen in the background, and you don't have to think about them. Data checks basically build a list of participants that meet the conditions that you've set up, and then you can decide to go in and apply the change you want to one or all of them at once. So data actions find everybody that meet the condition, and as soon as the trigger occurs, it just makes the change. Whereas data checks, they give you a list, and then you can go through and manually change them all or select which ones you'd like to change. So effectively, they do the same thing, but it's just how it's being done is different. So data actions happen immediately. Data checks happen with a manual review process. So with that being said, data actions are a little more dangerous if you don't get your filters set up correctly, because they're just immediately going to go and make all these changes as soon as you save them and as soon as the triggers occur. Whereas data checks, it just gives you that moment to confirm whether all of this change should happen. So data actions, when you should use them, basically whenever it's impossible to meet the condition accidentally. So you have to be very careful when you're setting up the filtering, which we'll talk about later, when you're setting up a data action, because you don't want to mess it up and have everybody get moved to the wrong event or something like that. So it's an automatic move no matter what. There's no exceptions to the rule. For example, if there's a situation where a race organizer may have some input over whether someone should be disqualified based on them getting a read on an on-course point or not, you might not want to do a data action there and instead do a data check. So you can give the race organizers like a list. Hey, we got 3 people who were seen at this checkpoint, but they were registered for an event that shouldn't cross that point. And then they can tell you, disqualify this one, leave that one, so on and so forth. The next two, they should always happen in the background, and you're using it to fill in non-scoring information. This is a creative use case for data actions. Basically, people use it as a way to set flags in the system. So for example, you may have a data action that just sets a custom field that is called like seen at corral entrance, and it's just like you're just looking for anybody who was seen at a corral entrance between this time and this time, and then it just sets the flag to true if anyone meets that condition. And later down the road, you might use that for troubleshooting purposes, right? For whatever reason, it could be anything at all. But it's a neat way to use data actions kind of non-destructively, because you're not changing any data that's going to impact scoring. It's changing data that you can use down the road for further troubleshooting purposes. So some examples here. Reading at the split after the start means you're moved to the half marathon. Pretty straightforward. Additionally, marking someone on corral if you aren't using corral clock times. So now for data checks, you're looking to assess whether or not to act on a participant. These are the kind of conditions where you're not absolutely certain that everyone who meets these conditions will absolutely get moved or get their data changed. So you're checking something on the fly. It could be just some data about how many people you want to see how many people are in this current state. You could use it in concert with data actions and custom fields to expand your checks. So if you did have a data action that was setting a flag to true when some conditions were met automatically, you could then use that custom field to say, hey, show me anyone whose corral was seen at corral flag was set to true. And that would show you a list of participants who met that condition via a data action. And then you could decide what you want to do with them. So you can use these two in conjunction as well. So some examples, some people who might have joined the early start corral, people who missed a turnaround split, but it's possible they just missed the read. A few things where it's ambiguous as to what you should do with them. So you can look at the list of participants and determine what you want to do on a case-by-case basis. And maybe it is that you want to move everyone or you want to change everyone's data. That's okay too. It's really easy to do it. You just select all and make the change. So data check reports are found on the dashboard. So you can actually see this new little area here. This will show you some information and counts of participants who meet these conditions. So you'll see these ones out there by default, but you can build custom ones as well. If you click one of the counts here, like one missing gender, it'll bring you right to the list of participants who are missing their gender. They update in real time. So as data is updating, getting changed at RunSignup and syncing down, those lists will update as well. Also, you can find it in the toolbar. So if you go and hover over data checks in the toolbar from any screen in RaceDay scoring, so you're not limited to the dashboard, you can check in on how many people have missed splits, how many finishers have missed a start read, so on and so forth. If you click the actual data checks text up at the top there, it will bring you to the list of data checks where you can view them, manage them, add new ones, update them, so on and so forth. Just a little screen recording showing you what that looks like. So you just have quick access to find anyone that meets these conditions. I've built out a few here. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do with these. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the default data checks. Many of you may have already seen this, but these are the ones we have. Show me anyone who's missing gender, missing age, missing a chip. This only shows if you actually have a bib and chip cross-reference imported into RaceDay scoring. People who have suspicious times. This just shows you a list of anyone who has an age grade over a certain threshold. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's 90 or 95. It's somewhere around there. But basically, it's just going to give you a list of participants who are unrealistically fast based on the distance of the event and their age. Missed splits, anybody who, for any event that has multiple segments in it, if they've missed one of them, then they'll pop up in this list. And finally, any finishers that have missed their start read. So this could be a problem, but it could not be. It depends on how good your start systems are. So this is a suspicious times one. Basically, it's going to just give me anybody who has an age grade over 90. Very straightforward, but for your purposes, you may need to adjust it. For example, if you have a very fast field, you might need to increase it. Or if you have a trail race you're working, you obviously want to decrease it because these age grade values are all based on road races. So it's a good catch. If you have people who switched events but didn't tell you, then you can see really easily if someone had a super fast time. Especially very helpful if it was fast for their age, but they didn't end up winning overall or something, so you'll miss it. So this will catch those people who have done a really unrealistic good time for their age. Missed splits, really straightforward. All it's doing is it's finding anyone who has any value in this field called missed segments. Missed segments is a field that's available generically out in all of our reporting and in our data checks. It's really helpful. It just tells you the names of all of the segments that this participant has missed. So if you're doing a long ultra, it will be really nice to be able to show there, hey, this person missed, the 20K, the 40K, so on and so forth. This just checks to see, hey, make sure that field is empty. If it's empty, they're good to go. If it's not empty, that means they've missed something. And this will just show you that list of participants who have missed it. So here you can see they got a 5K, 6.9 mile segments. These are the people who missed one. Okay, next we're going to talk about importing and exporting data checks. So data check reports can be imported and exported between races, so you don't have to rebuild them for each and every single event you do if you have a type of data check that you want to reuse over and over again. So keep in mind, as with everything else in the software, when you renew a race, all of the data and all of the setup and all of the configuration comes along with it. So this is helpful if you have one race and you want to move the data checks to a different one. But keep in mind, you don't have to do this every single year for the same event. They're just going to come over with your renewal. But just know that if you do have one that you built that's kind of complicated, you can just do this export data check, and then that'll create a little file for you that you can bring over to another computer and import it there. And this just shows you how that's done. If there are, if there are any references to pieces of data that are like variable fields, for instance, like a timing location name or a corral name or an event name or anything that could be different between races, you will have to map that here. So you'll have to make sure that you change out anything that is variable. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about the actual configuration of these, how you can build a data check or a data action. To start with, we'll talk about using participant search filters. So what these do is it selects on any piece of registration data as well as scoring data. So for example, you can easily search for anyone whose age is greater than or equal to 40, and that'll return everyone 40 and over. And then you can also search for anyone whose 5K split occurrence time of day was less than or equal to 7:15. So that would show me anyone who the first time they hit the 5K split, if it happened before 7:15 a.m., that would show them in the list. So keep in mind that the scored event specific filters, such as 5K split, would automatically not be looking at participants outside of the event they are set up for. So you may have a 5K split for a half marathon and a 5K split for the marathon, but they're technically not the same field because they're specific to the scored event they're set up for. So just be careful if you're using any kind of fields that are scored event dependent. So some really nice ones you can use are the did not start and the did not finish fields. Basically, if you set did not start to no, it would list everybody who started the race. We automatically lift those fields when they are detected on the course or they get a start read. And did not finish equals no, which is anybody who has a valid finish. These can help focus the report on just the participants you want to actually assess. So if you write a filter and it's showing you all of these participants that didn't even show up today, that's when you can use that did not start participant filter to make sure you're getting rid of anyone who really didn't show up that day. Okay, next is operations. So this is the operation dropdown when you're using any kind of filtering in RaceDay scoring. It's really good to learn what all of these do. We have like the little operator, but we also have a description of what it's doing to the right of it in parentheses. So equals is. That means like if gender is male, less than is less than, so on and so forth. There's some really nice ones down there. Is null, is not null, starts with, and contains. They're a little more advanced, but they're pretty helpful if you know what you're doing. So basically, an is null check is just seeing if a value is empty or blank or does not exist. So that's very different from 0. Just keep that in mind. Additionally, if you have a 5K and a 10K, saying is 5K is not exactly the same as saying is not 10K. Something that I see come up every once in a while is an issue where people have like a radio select, for example, a yes or no select. And they think that anyone who didn't respond no automatically responded yes. But it's not the case, because there are situations where people didn't respond either way. So you got to be careful with that, because there's actually 3 conditions in a 2 value, like yes, no radio select. There's yes, there's no, and I didn't respond. So you got to be very careful when you're analyzing data, making sure that you're capturing all valid responses. Next, we're going to talk about using the raw read search filters. So the next area in data checks and data actions is actually using raw read search filters. So what these do is they actually look at chip data for participants. So they're not looking at the participant data, the registration information, and so on. They're looking at the reads for that participant. So you can select based on a timestamp time, a location, event, whether that was used, and which occurrence it was. So you got to be pretty careful when you're doing these raw read search filters. Keep in mind, this is raw reads. This is not scored reads. So when we say raw reads, that's that big giant count in the top right where you've got like 100,000 reads in the system. We're looking at all of the data, because there might be a situation where you want to do a data check on some read data that was actually not used for scoring at all, right? You might want to use it from your announcer location. You might want to use it from a check location that's on course that you aren't reporting for splits. So that's why we open up the raw read search filters to actually raw data. Now, that's great, but you have to be very careful, because what it means is that you're looking at this whole set. So if you just say, if anybody was ever seen at a split point, it'll also cover all the times before the races even started that you collected, because it's just the raw data. So if you set up a data check that says, show me anyone who crossed the half marathon checkpoint, but was in the marathon, and people were walking around before the race started, and you had your systems on and you imported that data into RaceDay scoring, that would trigger it, even though it was way before the start, because this is just saying, give me all the data and figure out from there whether or not they meet these conditions. So just think about that when you're building out these filters. You may need to be more specific than you think you do, because it's going to bring in absolutely everything. And that's what I was talking about here. So if you want to say, well, actually, no, I want to make it just scored reads. Well, a scored read is just a used raw read. So what you can do is say, timestamp greater than this time, timestamp less than that time, used equals yes, and that will find any raw read that was selected to be used as a scored read within that time frame. The same is true for occurrences. So you can say, give me the second occurrence or the first occurrence or whatever. And that'll be very helpful to filter down the data to really just the data you're looking for. Okay, so let's get started on some examples. Wrong start. This is a very simple pair of data checks to look for participants who started with the wrong race. So it's very common to have 2 data checks like this if you have multiple events, that start at different start times. We know what it's like. People decide at the last moment to run in a different race because their buddy's doing the other one and they didn't tell anyone. So if you have different start times, what you would do is something like this. If the 10K started at 8 and the 5K started at 8:15, have a data check called the 10K wrong start that checks for anyone with a chip difference greater than 15 minutes. So chip difference is a field that is always there, and it basically tells you the difference between the assigned start time of day, whether that's the scored event start time of day or the corral start time of day this participant is a part of, and the chip start time that was accepted by the system for them. So when they crossed over the mats. So it took them 2 minutes to cross the start line after the gun went off. Their chip difference would be 2 minutes. So what this is going to do is find anybody who had a chip difference of greater than 15 minutes, because that would imply that this person actually started with the 5K, which was 15 minutes after the 10K. And then you would set up the area at the bottom of the data check to automatically move these participants into the 5K. So that just gives you a way to quickly look at a list of participants who had a chip difference greater than 15 minutes and move them over to the 5K because you know for a fact that they're going to be in the wrong event. Similarly, you could do a 5K wrong start, showing you anyone with a chip start who's got a read between 8 a.m. and 8:05, implying that they ran the 10K. So you can see what's different about this, and it's really important to understand what's different. Here we aren't using chip difference because the read actually isn't going to be used because it's going to be before they started. The system thinks they're supposed to start at 5K, so we're going to ignore all of the reads before 8:15, right? This is why it's powerful that data checks have access to the raw read data, because this person who started at 8 or 8:05 based on the fact that they actually went out for the 10K, all that data is going to be ignored by the system, not accepted, not used. So you have to use a raw read filter and say, hey, show me anyone who happened to have a read around then, even if it was ignored, who cares? Because that would indicate that they likely ran out with the 10Kers instead of the 5Kers. So then you can set out a DQ for these participants. Maybe there's a prize difference. It's kind of up to you on how you want to handle all these. Important thing to note, if you are deciding if you'd move someone or disqualify them, it's always a good idea to confirm with the race organizers what the ruling is, because you should be very, very clear with the participants what's going to happen if they get moved or if they are show up in the wrong event. And if the race organizer hasn't thought about that scenario, it's a good idea to remind them because it happens all the time, as we know. So this is what it would look like. This is the 10K wrong start. Like I said, this one uses the chip difference because the chip difference is based on actually selected reads and it's happening later. Whereas this one is using the raw data and it's just looking at, hey, give me anyone who had a read at the start location between this time and that time, because that's going to indicate that they probably started with the wrong event, even if those reads weren't used. And here's what it looks like. If you get someone showing up in one of these data checks, you can just select Update Selected. Next, we're going to talk about a split too short data check. This is a setup where a participant reads on a segment before their minimum time, implying that they shorted the course or the timer needs to adjust their minimum times. So it's looking for participants who had a missplit but have an unused read at that location. This is a really neat way to use filters. Because the segments are event specific, a null segment in the Olympic try would also be a null segment in the intermediate try, for example. So you have these search filters in there, like the bike is null, or the international try bike is null, and so on and so forth. Then the raw read search filter is set up to be the location is bike out in, and occurrence is less than 2, and timestamp is not null. So it's like any of these reads, as long as there's a time at all for occurrence 2. It's important to remember that timestamps are any read, so setting that filter on this is important to keep out anyone who's reading as they put their bikes in the transition, for example. This is what it would look like. You got your bike chip time is null, the international bike chip time is null, and anybody who was seen at this location had an occurrence that was less than 2 with a timestamp that was greater than this value. Okay, next is another creative use case for data checks. It's an announcer check. Basically, it's a way to see if anyone has a read at the announcer, but not in the finish line. This is like that scenario where you see people, when you're reviewing footage after the race, someone says, hey, I'm not showing on the results, and you have your video recording because you're a good timer, and you go back to the time of day when they cross, and you can see them stopping their watch and covering their bib in the moment they're crossing the finish line. So this is a way to get a semi-accurate time for them if you're not going right back to the video. So it's set up to be looking for reads on the announcer line and for participants who had a timestamp after this time on the announcer line and who did not finish. So this is nice because typically announcer locations are not set up with segments. So you don't have to go in and set up segments in order to do this because it's always looking at the raw data, not scored read data. So this is something that can be extrapolated to use for checking mobile timing or backup reads to find participants who missed on the finish if using a split. Now, when using this check, it is best to create a data action that fills out a custom field so that any later read on that main line that is used incorrectly will remove them from that report. So remember that these timestamps are essential to eliminate reads pre-start or event, or select the used equal yes. So here's what it would look like if you wanted to set up a basic announcer check, data check. Did not finish is yes, because you want to make sure you don't want to include anyone who actually did get a finish, and then just anyone who had a time after this time of day at the location for announcer, and it'll show you everybody who meets those conditions. So this is a really good check to have just always there, because if someone did get that announcer read after that time and they didn't get a finish, it's a good chance that they were missed, and you should go check in on their other times. Okay, next we're going to talk about secondary read checks. This is pretty neat. It shows that there are some pretty cool things you can do with the raw read filters. This is one of them, because you can actually say, I want to find any reads from this particular stream, and I want to see if any reads from this particular stream are actually used. So if they were selected for scoring purposes, right? So basically, for cross country, it's really critical because the finish order can be, it's really important for cross country. So you have to make sure that you're getting the right data. And so basically this is finding anyone who have finished. Both the primary and secondary readers are set as main streams, so there's no concern about a later read changing results. The main thing to look for here is that a read on a secondary stream has used equals yes. So it's kind of up to you on how you set this up. But what you could say is this stream name in this case was just called secondary. But what this is doing is saying, find me anyone whose DNF is no at the finish, who was seen at the finish, and the stream was secondary and it was used. Because this is just basically going to give you a list of anybody whose time from a secondary source was used. And that could indicate a problem that you want to look into later on. So it's just a neat way of using different streams as a way to drive your data checks. Okay, next we're going to talk about data actions and data checks, the edit history portion of this. So in RaceDay scoring, there is a little magnifying glass in the bottom left. This is a global edit history for this entire race. Show me all the changes that have happened to all the different fields in the system. Show me the source, who it was changed by, what the old value was, and what the new value is. So this is very powerful stuff. If you aren't aware of this, it's super helpful if you ever need to look into an issue that came up or a piece of data that changed about someone. So this lets you filter based on the edit source and on the field that was changed. So in this case, maybe you had a data action called, in this case, it was a really silly one. It was update age, just changes anybody's age to 149 if they are male. But you can see here, it just demonstrates what this can show you. It can show you all of the participants that were updated by this data action and what the old value was and what the new value is. So if you ever messed something up and you needed to revert back to the original state, you could look into this. And you can also just check in to see how many changes occurred from your data actions that are out there. So this is really nice if you want to get a global overview of all the changes in your race, or you wanted to see all the changes for a particular data action, or you wanted to see all of the things that changed anyone's registration events, for example. You could do that here. But what also is nice is on the individual participant record, you have a list of all the edits done just to this entity. So you can see here, this person was created from the RunSignup API, which just means it was added at RunSignup at some point. We don't know if it was manually entered or if they registered online. There's no way for us to know that. We just know it came from RunSignup at some point. And then we can see here that their age was updated from 32 to 149. And the source of the change was this data action. And so you can actually click into that data action if you needed to make a change to it or delete it because it's messing your data up. So this is a really cool feature. It's super helpful for troubleshooting purposes. if you ever are questioning what happened, how did this data change, what did it, you can go right here and you can see what the old data was and what the replacement value was and what actually did it. So keep in mind, if you ever have that moment, is your timing, and you're like, what the heck happened? I don't know what changed or who did it or whose fault is it? So just go to the edit history and you can see that audit log of all the changes that occurred for this person. Okay, so now we're going to go into data actions for cross-country. So cross-country has some scenarios that use data actions heavily, so we're going to dive into that. So oftentimes when you're scoring a cross-country race, coaches are not required to declare their varsity athletes. Yet a different scored event is necessary for varsity and junior varsity scoring. So they have different start times. So data actions give you an easy way to solve this problem by updating the participants automatically in real time based on some data. So basically, if you had boys varsity, boys JV, girls JV, all at different start times, you would create an extra event to start with called a holder event. So we see this with a lot of cross-country setups. They have this fifth event that's not actually used for anything, just set up as a holder as a way to import all of the participants into. So basically, once you get all of your scored events set up, data actions for each scenario need to be set up. So you want 4 data actions to be created. A data action that moves everybody who's seen between one time and another time to boys varsity from the holder event, and so on and so forth for all of your different scored events that are out there. So to set these up, go to data actions and click add. So here you need to set up the action trigger that actually causes the data action to fire. So what this one is based on is a raw read. So when a system sees a raw read for this person, it'll automatically apply the change that you set up here. So what you want to do is make sure, very first thing, you're only ever going to run this data action on a person who's in a holder event. You never would want to move someone from the boys race to the girls race just because they went over and watched the girls finish, right? Because you only want to do it once. You want to make sure that you're just moving them from a holder to a later start time. You don't want to say then, oh, they were seen even later than that, move them again. You only want to take action on those who are in that holder event. So it's critical that you get this right the first time. You set up your registration event is holder, and you could set a gender equals male as well. And this is what I was just talking about. So make sure that you set the registration event to be the holder. You don't want to run this again on for someone who's already moved, for example. The second piece is the raw read filter that looks for participants who meet the participant data criteria on top of that. So basically, it's going to say, okay, show me anybody who's in the registration event holder is a male. And as soon as I see a read at finish between this time and that time, move them over to a different event. Again, be very careful about this. Any read is going to be used here. I shouldn't say used because it's not actually used necessarily because they aren't in the event that it's valid for at the time that the data action is occurring. So basically, you're just looking at the raw data because it's just finding anyone who has reads between these times and automatically then moving them into the event. So this is what it would look like. It's pretty straightforward. Just set up your location and the timestamps for the time range that this event is valid and move them over to the boys varsity, for example. So data change is the last part. You're going to update the registration event to boys varsity. That's effectively going to move anyone who was seen between 2:30 p.m. and 2:55 p.m. into the boys varsity event. So obviously it's still necessary to set up scored events as you normally would for a cross-country race, but participants moved by a data action are automatically going to have all of those scored event parameters applied to them once their registration event is changed. So that's how you can do data actions for cross-country. Again, like I said from the very beginning, data actions happen automatically as soon as the conditions are met. So as soon as you get that read between this time and that time for this person and they're in the holder event and they're male, boom, it's going to move them over. So you have to be careful, just making sure you have AM and PM set correctly, making sure that you got the dates set correctly, making sure that all of that is good. Otherwise, you could run into problems where people are switching between events that you didn't mean to. So a lot of times I set this up as data checks for cross country as well. If you're not sure if you got it right the first time you do it, just because it's a little bit, it's less destructive. Things don't go totally sideways if you mess it up. It just requires a little bit more clicking, a little bit more manual intervention. Any of you who are familiar with Race Director, how that system would work, you'd probably be more accustomed to using data checks. Because with data checks, you'll see a list of the people who are going to get moved, and then you process them. Like in Race Director, where you would say, okay, I'm now going to process the times for the boys varsity, and then it shows you all the people that you got within the time filters that you set up in the chip import. It's kind of similar to that, where you'll see all the data, whereas with data actions, it just happens, and you're not even seeing anything. So basically, if you're super confident, you got everything set up properly, data actions are great. But if you're a little bit unsure, data checks are a nice manual intervention style that I think are better if you're just getting started. But yeah, I think that is all that I had for today. I suspect we'll have a few questions. Anything that I needed to bring up?
So Avery, going back to that last point, would you say, again, automation's great. Maybe changing a registration event is more riskier than changing a custom field value that some report's based on. So if you're changing custom fields, like whatever, you can always revert that back so that, maybe that would be a safer thing than changing the registration event. And then just maybe change custom fields and make your reports work off those fields. I mean, what would your opinion be on that?
Well, the issue with that is you need to have separate start times for the scored events.
No, I wasn't talking about this particular cross-country thing.
Oh,
that has to be the
okay,
registration event. I'm just talking in general. If people are thinking about using data actions, would you recommend them more towards changing custom fields and doing things like that and making it more automated? Okay.
Yeah, totally. That's like what I was talking about. We were saying you can create custom fields to set them, and then you can use data checks as a way to make the changes based on the fields. There's all sorts of options and things you can do. We're always happy to sit with you and figure out some good solutions for your specific scenarios. A lot of these are, you kind of got to figure out what you want to do. And a lot of times people don't know exactly what they want to do or what their data is going to look like. So we're happy to walk you through your thought process and how to build all of these. All right. Well, thanks again for coming today. Hope you learned something, and we'll talk to you next time. See you later. Bye.